Okay, I'd like to call to order the City Council study session for December 19th, 2022. For the record tonight, Ms. Hoppy and the mayor will not be here, and Councilwoman Nosler-Beck is joining us via Zoom. As we get started today, we've got two agenda items. We've got the 44th Avenue sub-area plan and the Wadsworth construction update. We'll start, as we always do, with the public comments. So do we have any public comment? I have none here in chambers. Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody online? All right. Then we can go ahead and move forward to agenda item number 1. That's the 44th Avenue sub-area plan. Mr. Goff, we have a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Stites. Stephanie, we do have a crew here. They're going to come sit at the table. We got plenty of room, but Stephanie Stevens, our senior planner, will introduce this item.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So for the record, I'm Stephanie Stevens, planner and project manager for the 44th Avenue sub-area plan, the city of Wheat Ridge side of things. And so we've made a lot of progress with the 44th Avenue sub-area plan since we've seen you last in May. So we're excited to come to you all tonight, report back with some of the things that we've been hearing, as well as give you all the opportunity to weigh in. So the focus for tonight is to discuss the plan recommendations that will be included in the final plan, and we're happy to answer any questions about engagement or otherwise along the way, but do refer to your packet materials, which include an engagement summary and a bunch more info. So we're happy to answer questions, though, if you have them at the end of the presentation. The focus of tonight's discussion will be around these detailed plan recommendations. And keep your packets handy, please, because we will be kind of referring to page numbers in that document. So I provided printed copies. There's a couple in the back in case we had anyone come from the public as we move along. And now I'll go ahead and hand it over to Jay Rankins, and Mark De La Torre is here as well with MIG, who will be presenting tonight and walk us through these recommendations. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Council. Super excited to be with you, be at this point in this really great process that we've been going throughout this year. Our quick agenda, what we wanted to do is, rather than go through every detail of the recommendations, we wanted to give you an overview and then allow time for conversation. So as Stephanie said, we'll refer to different page numbers and different sections, but we'll try to keep the presentation portion pretty brief. If you want to stop me during, please do so. Mark and I can answer questions. Mark may interject as we go along as well. And then really focusing on the highlight of the strategies. So the project elements, we had a pretty extensive technical analysis that included market study, included traffic analysis, looking at economic opportunities as well. And we really paired that with the community outreach. So wanting to hear what the community had to say, but then balancing that with the technical analysis and letting them inform each other throughout the process. That started with the existing conditions, moved forward into the sort of the development of goals, different recommendations, and then importantly, the implementation strategy. Our recommendation overview, you can kind of think of like a nesting doll. So we have 3 different categories, those being primary corridor investments, so those being really focused along 44th itself. I'll elaborate in a moment. Next would be community sub-area enhancements. And so those would be sort of the overall area, but thinking about the areas off of 44th, or Kipling, which are primarily residential in nature. And then the overall connectivity improvements. So off of 44th, there was still a lot of interest from the community in improving connectivity both within the sub-area. Again, just as a reminder, that's I-70 on the west and the north, Clear Creek on the south and the east. But in addition to that, within the area, connecting to other areas, both within Wheat Ridge as well as nearby. Each of those then have a series of topics, so 3, 2, and 3 respectively. And then within each topic, we have some strategies. So we'll go run over those. The first topic under the corridor-specific improvements is large area developments. So A1 is Kipling mixed-use node. So thinking about that sort of major intersection, particularly the properties adjacent to it, looking at both the northeast corner as well as a potential development opportunity associated with the church at the northwest corner. Thinking about making that more mixed use, making it more pedestrian friendly, having a series of neighborhood serving uses at that particular intersection. And that's on page 5 of attachment 4. Next is the mixed use interstate node, so just going a little further north along Kipling, just south of I-70. Looking at development opportunities there. And this was one in particular spot where the community voiced a lot of support for a little higher intensity mixed-use development, being adjacent to the highway, and looking at something that might be commuter-focused, but also looking for opportunities for neighborhood uses. Connectivity and access being challenging there, but obviously would be a priority with new development, as well as hopefully working with CDOT long-term for further improvements. That's on page 6. Page 7, the travel center mixed-use node. In the short term, looking at safety and connectivity improvements. Part of that is sort of legibility, so signage wayfinding, looking at some traffic control improvements that could be made there, as well as pedestrian connections. Longer term, looking at potential redevelopment of the site, thinking about something that's much more mixed use in nature, particularly with commercial and hospitality being priorities from the community. Before I go to the next one, anything you'd add, Mark, on this one?
No, I think that's really helpful, Jay. And just if you're looking at your packets, make sure it's 3 points.
There you go.
If you're looking at your package, you'll note that there was a detailed community engagement summary. The pie charts that you're seeing up over to the right-hand side is an aggregate summary from really what we heard in person at the public meeting at the Rec Center, a joint meeting we had with the Open Space Management Plan, as well as the What's Up Wheat Ridge survey. This time is about 100 or so respondents between those. The green being in support, the purple being in opposition, and the yellow not yet convinced one way or the other. So,
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Yeah, so relative to the work that we do within Wheat Ridge previously, as well as in other communities, it's a really high level of support for these concepts. And you'll see that relatively strong support across the board for the recommendations, which I think is a strong sign that the staff, us as a consultant team, the steering committee that volunteered to work with us listened really well to the community throughout the process, and it's the recommendations that the community is really supporting. Next is looking at existing uses and infill development along the corridor. B1 is a small business focus, so this is looking at if you think about using Kipling as a dividing line along 44th, B1 is related to the east portion of the corridor, so east of Kipling, over to Clear Creek, and really looking at a small business focus, supporting existing businesses that are there already, as well as looking at opportunities for additional neighborhood serving businesses, having those be less auto-oriented, ideally over time, both in terms of the configuration or improvement to existing businesses, as well as new businesses that might come in. Looking west of Kipling, more of a residential and neighborhood focus. So a combination of housing potentially along the corridor, and then businesses or commercial uses that would exist. Those being neighborhood serving in sort of use. And then looking at access, in both scenarios, really improving pedestrian access to 44th from the surrounding neighborhoods. Mark, anything you want to add?
you're doing great, Jay.
Thank you, Mark. Oh, there we go. Did it? Okay, great. So next is existing uses and infill development. Again, specific along the 44th corridor, so thinking about site improvements and building improvements. So this is looking at existing structures and sites along the corridor. So in terms of site improvements, looking at potential reconfiguration of surface parking lots, thinking about sort of the outside of buildings, pedestrian circulation and access, potentially end-of-trip facilities, so that could be bike racks, other amenities, benches and that sort of thing, and creating opportunities for outdoor seating or dining to make a more pedestrian-friendly environment and a place that you may want to hang out and not just move along. And then in terms of the building improvements, looking at facade improvements as well as internal improvements that could accommodate new uses, adaptive reuse of existing structures, and basically improving both the function and the aesthetics of existing buildings along the corridor. Again, strong support there with 90 and 72%. And then finally, we have the pedestrian experience. So we do have, if you remember the third category that we'll get to, it's overall connectivity improvements. This is a little related, but really focused on 44th, the kind of main corridor, the namesake for the sub-area, and thinking about the experience that is created. So some of those earlier strategies that I talked about sort of speak to this as well, but really explicitly thinking about streetscape design and how are we accommodating a really sort of pedestrian-friendly, safe, and comfortable environment, but notably one that is memorable and one that you want to sort of keep coming back to, a strolling street, if you will. So thinking about buffered sidewalks, wide sidewalks, shaded sidewalks, things like that. The nodal connectivity and easements, so starting to think about sort of connections from the neighborhoods to different spots along the corridor, and connections to some of the other amenities that are directly along 44th. And then C3 is Family-Focused Activity Center. So that's really speaking specifically to the portion that's right near Anderson Park, looking at both the city-owned facility building that's on the north side of the park, on the south side of 44th, looking at the commercial properties on the north side of the street, and really thinking about how does that sort of complement each other, both from a public realm improvement perspective as well as the private properties, to create space that's programmable, create space that's easy to navigate, easy to get through with a family, in a place that really complements the park, which is such a huge community asset, and we heard about over and over again as being a desired destination in the community. Anything on this one, Mark? All right. All right, so next, this is the second category, if you remember that diagram. So we had three big kind of orange boxes. This is the second orange box. So historic character. Looking at agricultural heritage and recreation tourism. This is specific to the west end of the corridor, thinking about the Bauhaus, thinking about the park, as well as some of the historic uses that were either agricultural in nature. I guess all of it was historically, but you know, more recently, some of the places are still used for growing food, for gardening, even in some of the places where it's a little less dense, has more of that pastoral feel. So really trying to build on that, thinking about agricultural heritage and recreation tourism, thinking about different ways that the both the commercial kind of sector as well as the private sector can leverage that, build on that story, build on that past. So it could be a cluster of businesses that continues to grow. You see some of that now with some of the sort of outdoor-oriented businesses. There's the garden store, you know, things like that. RVs even, which is somewhat auto-oriented, but you can kind of see fitting in that overall kind of theme. But looking at other ways to supplement and complement that. And then this employment node, which would actually be the northeast corner of the sub-area, thinking about how do we sort of leverage that sort of historic employment use, position it for success moving forward. There was some discussion at earlier points in the process about should that be a redevelopment opportunity, and ultimately the community said, no, we actually really like this as an employment hub, and the fact that it's providing jobs, and we just want to make sure that it's successful moving forward. So thinking about different amenities, different improvements to make sure that that continues to be a competitive and successful employment node. All right, next is residential uses. So again, thinking about those non-commercial areas. So primarily that's going to be off of Kipling, off of 44th. And so existing neighborhoods, really thinking about how do we improve the existing neighborhoods. A couple of things there, one in terms of use, looking at sort of more nuanced, almost surgical ways to improve and increase housing diversity. So those are going to be kind of very small moves. There are some vacant sites in the neighborhoods. There are some opportunities for perhaps ADUs and things of that sort. And there are, particularly in sort of the north side of the corridor, west of Kipling, there are some spots that could accommodate some smaller development. And the community identified that as sort of missing middle being probably most appropriate as far as infill opportunities. But then also, again, just thinking about increased access. So safety, connectivity, which kind of leads to our next category as well. And then general housing. Thinking about how do we provide additional housing within this overall sub-area. And the major focus, in addition to those kind of nuanced, I guess I use the term surgical infill opportunities, we're really along the corridors. So thinking about the mixed-use development, thinking about the neighborhood focus, to the west of Kipling, thinking about some of the mixed-use development that might happen along Kipling or in one of those nodes we talked about at Kipling and 44th or at the interstate node, or potentially long-term with the travel center, looking at additional housing opportunities there, and those probably being the best opportunity to have sensitive sort of transitions to the surrounding neighborhoods. And then we get to the connectivity improvements. So 44th Avenue corridor enhancements. So those would be along the lines of, you can see some of the examples there, public art, thinking about underground and utilities. There was some interest in bike facilities, although there's not really a plan to reconfigure the curb to curb within the 44th right-of-way. But definitely in the pedestrian realm, we can improve the sort of safety, comfort, for pedestrians along the corridor, and then look at parallel routes for cyclists. Neighborhood connectivity, there's a lot of interest in not just connectivity to 44th, but north-south connectivity overall. So that would be connecting south to the creek and the trail, connecting north to the Ward Station, potentially even exploring additional connections, and then this northwest loop. Can you speak to that one, Mark? Remind me on the northwest loop.
Yeah, certainly. So the Northwestern Loop, actually, I think the seed for it started in our first conversation with y'all earlier this year, and as we broached that with the community at large, it gained a lot of traction. So that's thinking about the northwestern quadrant up there. Miller really west to Tabor, and then the spaces in between, thinking about how the frontage road currently serves as one of the only east-west connectors in that area, given the old historic ag parcels and the alignments that those have, which prohibit general connectivity. So the idea was we can provide that in the short term by identifying a better connectivity loop in that particular quadrant, but with a new street section of the frontage road itself, and then being a little more intentional about how Miller, being one of the main school armatures in the north-south end, connects to 44th, and then the frontage road. I think in that one, and we've again seen strong support for that, that will require a bit of strategic signage as you get to the west end down there, knowing that the Tabor bridge and alignment and how some of that street network meets 44th again gets a little complicated, but the idea is that that's serving both as an amenity as well as a means of connection on the northwestern and in the short term.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. The other one, I guess, on the neighborhood connectivity that I think shows up on, that's page 28, it says, but looking at for an additional east-west connection. It's pretty challenging north of 44th, particularly west of Kipling, to move kind of east-west through the neighborhood. So as development or redevelopment might occur, looking for an additional opportunity for, it could just be a pedestrian and bike connection, potentially a roadway connection or maybe a private road connection, but looking for opportunities like that. The creek trail access I mentioned a couple of times. But this being really important, probably one of the strongest amenities in the area. People mention small businesses, people mention the schools and parks, and people mention the creek trail as probably the strongest amenities. And so improving connectivity, looking for potential for new access points, improving the access points that do exist. And then even where those access points do exist, sometimes it's tough to get across 44th if you're on the north side, or moving east-west again to get to that access point. So we've identified specific opportunities to improve that. And then I-70 bridges and underpasses, I mentioned that interest in getting to other areas, particularly north of I-70 in this instance. So we've identified several opportunities, thinking that it is probably opportunity-based, a longer-term prospect, but some of those bigger moves, like a pedestrian underpass or a pedestrian bridge, or I guess it could be a full functioning, multimodal bridge, but those sometimes take 5, 10, 15, 20 years to realize. So starting those conversations now and planting the seeds. 44th Avenue intersection improvements. So this would be specifically looking at different intersections. There are quite long stretches along 44th with no traffic controls. So not only improving those existing intersections where there are traffic control signals, but looking for new opportunities to do so. I don't know, Mark, if you want to call out any specifics there.
Yeah, certainly. So, and one of the reasons, and y'all have seen if you engaged in any of the activities that we had online, or if you attended the public meeting, that there was a bit of more to come on this particular one. We had our transportation planning sub-consultants, Fair and Peers, really dig into some of the weeds on this one with the signal warrant analysis, looking specifically at a number of intersections throughout the corridor that have, through both analysis and from the community, has told us been very problematic historically. So we're actually just off round 5 or 6 of edits on that, and we're pretty happy with the level of detail and rigor that they've put into it. So we'll be folding those in moving forward, and we can make sure that's part of the next session we have with y'all. To Jay's point, we was looking a bit more specifically at vehicular intersections, both related to the travel center, Tabor and Miller, and then pedestrian crossings with Robb, Parfit, and Miller as well. So more details on that are forthcoming.
Great, thanks, Mark. Next is the general intersection improvements. So that is thinking about all intersections being important, not just those critical intersections that Mark was just speaking to that were identified through that traffic analysis. So some of those being along 44, some of those being other areas. But looking at crossing treatments, looking at curb extensions, looking at signage, as well as even just the visibility for pedestrians and cyclists and motorists as they approach an intersection. So thinking about crossing and safe movements. And then the 44th Avenue Bridge at Clear Creek, the high priority there is creating a safer, more comfortable pedestrian sort of access across the bridge. So that was highlighted as well as a key strategy.
That's it.
And that is it. All right.
So I'll note as we're closing here just a few things, obviously, that y'all are well aware of, but given the open space management plan that's currently ongoing, as well as the affordable housing strategy and action plan, we touch on housing and the creek, but a lot of those documents are going to be digging into much greater detail than we'll do as part of a sub-area planning process. And if we're touching on those, it's really kind of an addition to, but we're going to be assuming a lot of that direction will be provided through those planning efforts as well.
Thank you for the presentation. Do we have questions or comments from council? Ms. Dozman?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. They put you right in there, yeah. So I just wanted to kind of call attention to some of the traffic calming and like lane configuration recommendations. The first it's mentioned is in the travel center. So I'm guessing that's west of, just east of Ward.
Yeah, it'd be the segment between Ward and then the I-70 on-ramp light.
So are some of these streetscape design recommendations going to move us in the direction of narrowing 44th Avenue?
So I'd have to dig into the analysis that Fair and Peers has provided, because part of it was looking at how the trucks are currently entering and exiting at that midpoint in the intersection and the jackknifing that occurs there. I don't know that any of the recommendations specifically got to lane widths in that particular instance.
It did not, but it did explore potential median in the center to help with those turning movements, entering and exiting for the trucks.
Yeah, so that intersection is completely chaotic
Yeah.
with the trucks trying to exit out of the travel center.
It's all just paint on the pavement as well.
Yeah, and I mean, and when they have to turn out, I mean, they'll stop traffic altogether.
Totally. And they get stuck there too.
They stuck,
Yeah.
exactly. My only concern with us talking about lane reconfigurations, and potential streetscape designs is that we come back to the road diet of 38th Avenue debacle that we had. I feel that the community lost a lot of trust with the government and staff, and we've done a lot of hard work in regaining that and having that public input process and allowing citizens to engage and interact and be involved throughout the process. So I would just hate to kind of drudge that back up before
Yeah.
we're embarking on major development projects.
Yeah, to be clear, I sort of alluded to it early, but when I said there was no, I think it was when I brought up the bike lane comment that someone had brought up. So there's no plan to reconfigure, and there's no recommendation in this plan to change from the 2 lanes in both directions. So the lane reconfiguration is more about the left-hand turn lanes and the addition of medians and sort of clarity for pedestrian crossings. And not only are the trucks making kind of crazy movements and that are blocking everything, there's also residents making sort of illegal lefts and things like that. And so just adding clarity, adding true physical buffers or barriers to improve safety, improve that legibility. So we hear you loud and clear, and we heard it from the community loud and clear too, frankly. So, yeah.
Ms. Weaver?
My question is also around the travel center. But I was just kind of curious how we should think about that area, because, you know, I think historically it's been, it's a truck stop.
Mhm.
And I make an illegal left all the time, go in long shots, and,
Yeah.
no, it's, well,
Did you see me like look over at you real quick?
I have a big truck, well, they're all trucks in that lot, so maybe I shouldn't call myself out. My point is how should we be thinking as a government about this kind of area? Is it an area, because it's not pedestrian friendly, it's not bike friendly, it's always, right, unless you can go over it or under it, it's always gonna be this clash with the truck stop, but that's also an important thing, that area that needs to happen. And I was just kind of curious, do we look at it as integration, or do we look at it as isolate it and make sure we have the space to get there, to do those things? Because while it is part of our community, it's also most people, except for the restaurants and things, you know, it's a drive-by type thing. And I was just kind of curious how we should be thinking about that kind of, because it's still an asset. It's just a different kind of asset than a lot of cities have, except that all places who have interstate access have this kind of thing. And I kind of feel like we demonize it a little bit when it's also it's an economic generator, and I will continue to make my left turn. So.
Yeah, I'll start, and then I would ask Mark and Stephanie to chime in as well, sort of how we approached it. But I think, just to frame it up, I think it is challenging, to your point, because the community, pretty much to a person, you know, they are advocating for a more pedestrian-friendly, less auto-oriented, you know, sort of corridor along 44th, including the west end around the travel center. And so our thought is that it is a functioning, highly productive use currently. So how do you thread the needle and kind of balance both? And so we have a combination of short-term and long-term recommendations that I sort of spoke to, and Mark can probably detail a little bit more. But I think of your choices of integrating or isolating, I think it is because of the configuration of the on-ramps, because of 44th right there, it probably is leaning more towards the isolation kind of route, but then allowing for and maybe encouraging in some way integration long-term if it were to redevelop. So I don't, you want to speak more to sort of how we approached it specifically with the recommendations?
No, I mean, I think that's a good way of framing it, and Stephanie can get into detail with the separate analysis that's underway and looking at in greater detail about what that sales tax generation is from an economic standpoint to figure out what that larger role is that it plays. I think as part of a sub-area planning process and looking 20 years to the future, we want to make sure we're accounting for all those different variables. And if the community, by and large, is saying, hey, we don't like it, we're trying to make sure we're thinking through, like, okay, if it does, what are the other things that we could take into consideration from an economic standpoint, from a overall land use kind of mix for the community standpoint? It is a tough one, and as a cross-country road tripper, where you know, I'm a big fan of travel centers. I count on those, but like where they are located in towns are not often where we have ours located in terms of adjacency to community and development. It is tucked out on the end, and when you leave the travel center, you're usually back on the road again out to the next town. So it's a bit of a tough one to that point, and I think to Jay's response, isolation, if that is the near term, might be the better piece of, okay, we need to be safe, we need to make sure we're moving people efficiently, but it's a tough one to keep in an evolving land use mix for a community that's so nested into kind of where people live and function.
Yeah, I think the alternative in terms of integration would be building on it in a way, not like not expanding the travel center, but looking at other travel-oriented, uses and that sort of thing, and that did not really jive with what the community wanted to see for south of there or east of there.
The westbound truck movement's tough too. Being
Yeah.
spit out onto Ward and then being required, then coming south on Ward and then the left again. That's just a really inefficient. We looked at a number of different ways to try to, like, all right, hypothetical design, how do you fix this? And those on-ramps, where you actually enter and exit the freeway, just create a big issue. Even if you fix one of them,
You create a new problem. with
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, and it's almost impossible, to walk or to bike on the streets in that area if you're coming around from the highway.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
And just to add, so Mark alluded to it, but we're doing an additional economic analysis specifically focusing on the truck stop, as well as a couple of borderline sites that are kind of major sites around, like the RTD lot and Ward Ponds. So not directly in the sub area, but impacted by the sub area. And we've just began conversations with the truck stop owners to see what we can do to work with them on some of these things, because some of the recommendations that are coming out of the plan might make life a little bit uncomfortable for them, such as a median in the center of 44th, which restricts those movements. So the goal is integration, right? So hopefully they'll work with us on integration. And then the plan is also looking at kind of long-term things and what could happen if the site changed at some point in the future.
Sure. I would I guess my comment would be, because I think you're all absolutely right. I mean, it is what it is right now. We used to be on the edge of town. We're no longer on the edge of town. It's a legacy thing. I do think we have an opportunity because of the trails and things that are sort of just below, if you will, to create a different pathway for peds and bikes that I just don't think a lot of people know about. I mean, I've lived in Wheat Ridge for a while now, and I still sort of have to pull out a map to understand the connectivity of a trail and whether I can bike it or whether I need to walk it. But I think we're going to be faced with that connectivity up to the amenities at those lakes. And I want to make sure we're not seeing new residents trying to walk and bike in that area if we're going to say, yeah, we're going to continue having giant trucks and that difficulty of movement, but just really making it clear that we've created a pathway.
What's an alternative that's safer and more comfortable?
Yeah, because you can still pop up and get to those places. I don't think I will ever bike to Long Shots. I will drive my car the 2 blocks from my house, sadly, but being able, when I'm on my bike and want to get to another biking amenity, just having that be something that's okay. I think sometimes we try and integrate things and say, it has to be bike and ped and serve these giant trucks all at the same time. And I just don't know if in the short term of 20 years that is realistic until it totally redevelops. But I think we have the opportunity with the current open space that we have to still make really cool connectivity, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think we all know that here, but I just, sometimes, to your point, we talk about the park plan, and then we talk about the traffic integration, and we're not talking about how sometimes you can pop up and get through and then onto a park. And anyway, thanks.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, it's actually a really good one more thing on this, sorry. The really good opportunity in this particular section, because as I mentioned earlier, the east-west connectivity is so poor off of 44th, with the exception of the Creek Trail and the frontage road. And so this is, like you said, we have those open spaces there, so there's sort of a unique opportunity. Otherwise, it's kind of squished, and there's a lot of dead-end streets and things like that. So, yeah, we should definitely look at that. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I've got Councilor Nosler-Beck next.
Thanks, and thanks for all the work on this. And I guess I really appreciated the last conversation there about the travel center, and we've got Heine's right there, and Edwards Meats, and I really am hopeful that as we try to figure out what those solutions look like, it's that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we can keep those businesses where they are, and only make things better and not make it harder for them. And so I think, we were talking about, the big truck traffic and how that impacts things. I mean, I've, in the past probably 6 months, seen trucks get stuck in the way things are configured right now, and then they block a portion of 44th, trying to take a left or a right out of the travel center. It's just an awkward thing that happens. And I also take I take an illegal left into Edwards all the time. From where you're coming, Amanda, you're taking an legal left into Buckshot. But it's just a gnarly intersection that has never really made much sense for any of the users. And so the big thing that I've heard from a lot of residents, I say a lot, but from 3 residents who had moved into those townhomes that are by Heine's, the new construction. I think there was even a photo of them there. Is just that the truck traffic, often the trucks are using that side road and then the bridge to go over by the lakes that were mentioned before. And that is a really residential feeling space now. And so as we're looking at all of this, I'm just challenging us. I'm agreeing with what Councilor Weaver was saying as well, but we need to do it in a way that we're also preserving what we've got there, because all of that business and just basically those economic drivers in our city are so important. I don't want us to lose any of those businesses either. And so it was really great to hear the feedback today, and it sounds like everybody's on that same page. The one thing that I just kind of had a question about was I walk or try to ride my bike a lot down 44th from about Anderson Park to, I try to do it a couple times a summer to Heine's. And one of the biggest issues I see in the sidewalks is that, there's so many parking lot entrances just because we were built as a city during the 50s and the 60s where everybody drove into their businesses and there was a parking lot there. As we're thinking about this, I think we really have to think about creating some kind of parking infrastructure for the businesses or something, so that what happens when you're riding your bike or walking with your kids down those sidewalks is you never know. People aren't used to pedestrians being there, and so they dart out of their parking lots. And I'm getting really specific on this, but it's just what the entire corridor is peppered with. And I loved some of the artistic renditions of that, but of what we saw, what this could look like. It's just, I think we're going to have to figure out how we also deal with parking too. Because a lot of these businesses like having that off-street parking as an option. So there's just some of my feedback, and I participated in some of the sessions and heard a lot of great things, and just am so appreciative of this whole process. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Counselor Hoteen and then Counselor Ohm after that.
Great, thank you so much. I have the short mic, I have to like hunch over it. So thank you guys for all your work to date on this. It's a substantial sub-area and complex, and I really appreciate that you're able to get so much support for the recommendations. I think that's helpful to not just see sort of where you are structurally in the process, but the community's coming alongside that, so that really helps a lot. So I have a handful of things. So first of all, I have ridden my bike to long shots, as well as taken many an illegal left turn into various businesses, since we're all confessing
I'm not gonna
this.
live that one
We're, actually, city council's the reason the traffic's so bad there. So,
I was going to say that the chief's listening.
right. If he is also, my neighbors haven't been mowing their lawn. No, I'm kidding. So a couple of things I just want to comment, since we're kind of focused a little bit in the discussion around that, like particularly, I'm going to just call it the janky part of the corridor. There is a lot of the truck usage. I mean, the good news is the trucks are moving slowly. So that's actually one of the things I like about that part of the corridor, is that the trucks become traffic calming. Every other linear foot of that corridor is a speedway. And so the chaos of it actually does serve a purpose of, it is traffic calming through there as the trucks are jackknifed in the middle of it. It is incredibly incoherent and treacherous to get from the creek to the north side of 44th, if you're on foot or on bike. And so, improvements to both like the Tabor connection to the creek as being signed. And then the thing that I just really want to emphasize, and whether it's falling into the like purview of this study or if our public works director over there is perking up, today's existing like crossings are really dangerous. And I think we really shouldn't wait for the recommendations of this. We really need to look like that. The rapid flashing beacon crosswalk we have actually should just get removed. It's incredibly dangerous. It's non-localized traffic. It's 3 lanes of traffic. The light wasn't working the other day when I tried it. Like so I think we should look right now at just some quick wins. But to Ms. Weaver's point around, you kind of can't really have it be both a successful truck stop and like a bike ped mecca. I think, really looking at the very least to make sure it's working from a transportation standpoint, that there are people who are using 44th for transportation on their bikes and trying to, at least safely navigate it. Hopefully CDOT's putting in some more improvements on Ward. So in general on the corridor, and this kind of speaks to today's conditions, but as this plan comes forward and brings forward recommendations, rapid flashing beacons, I would love to see that they get bulb out treatments. I think that particular corridor, since we are looking at 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, rapid flashing beacons are like a little bit dangerous with that condition, because you get the car in the left lane stops and then the car behind them gets impatient, goes around. So bulb outs would provide that additional protection, and would like to see a lot more pedestrian crossings. I did a measurement when you guys first started and I couldn't find it, but like the length, I'm sure you've measured this too, to safely cross as a pedestrian is like at times like 3/4 of a mile, which pedestrians are not gonna do. They're gonna dart across there. So really like speed management's important.
That's only if you count the hour that we use as safe.
Yeah, which I don't really. Yeah.
You're up to 2 miles.
Yeah, it's 2 miles. So really looking at that sort of that frequency and iteration of safe pedestrian crossings, because we have a lot of parks and schools through there. And then to a point that somebody just made recently, I think Val did, because this corridor is not being considered for bike lanes and there are not bike lanes, we ride our bikes on the sidewalks on 44th Avenue. There is actually a lot more bike usage on 44th than on 38th where we do have bike lanes. I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that, but So I think that's something to keep in mind. If we are not accommodating bikes on 44th, there is a lot of bike usage, and it is bikes for transportation. 44th, if you talk to RTD, the usage of putting bikes on buses on the 44 is one of like their highest bike use corridors, like west of Sheridan, in our quadrant. So there is a lot of bikes there. So we're gonna have to recognize if we're not accommodating bikes specifically on the street, they're gonna use the sidewalks. And if we're imagining the sidewalks are a pedestrian-friendly environment, they are going to be co-used by bikes, as long as there's not bike facilities. So just keeping that in mind for multi-use safety. So I don't know if you guys are looking at like the width of the sidewalk as a multi-use trail that's a little bit wider, or how you're thinking about accommodating that.
Yeah, certainly. So it's aligning with Jefferson County's recent bicycle trails and pedestrian master plan as well. They're identifying 44th as it turns into 58 and continues on to Golden as a primary bicycle route. So we're actually aligning that with the south side of the street. Our current consideration is the dimensions of that are still under exploration based on our bike pedestrian master plan's recommendations, as well as coordination with some realities of the right-of-way. But it would be for a multi-use path up to 10 to 12 feet on the south side, and then ideally a buffered sidewalk condition on the north side would be the two kind of design elements we're looking at in greater detail now.
Okay, great. And then my last point, Ms. Dozman, said that the 38th Avenue bike lane debacle lost a lot of trust with the community, but I'd like to remind us all that that was over 10 years ago, and that we learned through the NRS that more than 50% of our residents have not lived here 10 years. So we, every city's had like its ups and its downs, and its things that have worked and things that haven't worked. And I really hope we don't shackle ourselves in the future to imagining what's working for us in the next 20 years by things that happened in the past. We have, different community needs, or, business environments change. So, process-wise, we want to be good to our community, and I think your engagement process has been very good to our community. But I really would hate 44th to, not be its best version because of what 38th is or is not. So I'm excited to see the next round, and weirdly, I'm excited for what Fairs and Piers has to say. So looking forward to that, the warrant analysis. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Mr. Ohm and then Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One question I have is, did you guys do any type of pedestrian bike count, traffic counts along 44th?
So the signal warrant analysis they did was specifically at the intersections and crossing movements for bike ped at Miller, Robb, and Parfit as part of this.
And what do those generally show? Like a high usage, medium, low?
Not as high as the warrant would have called for a safety upgrade, but given both perception and realized use of those current safety measures on the crossing, I think the recommendations still are looking conversions to PFBs, pedestrian hybrid beacons, the overarm bars for a PED connection as opposed to the actuated flashing rectangles.
And then would there be like a future study to see how that, if things are trending up or down in the future as we, over the years?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be a natural part of the process, but I'll note that down. That's a good thing to include in implementation.
Yeah, it's one of those that's tough because if it's an unsafe crossing, like, it's not a surprise that the numbers aren't really high, so.
Yeah.
Until you actually create a good crossing environment, you wouldn't expect pedestrian and bicycle numbers to be high unless someone has to use that mode or that particular intersection.
And were you able to pull any data of accidents happening at 44th and Ward because of illegal left-hand turns east or west?
Yeah, thinking back to the existing conditions analysis and the crash data there, the most accidents were on Kipling, but the second, I think, was close to the truck stop and the Ward intersection, and the third was oddly in front of Young's. But come again? Yes. Yeah.
And
Ms.
then,
Leah.
and then did you guys, and I know this is maybe a little outside, but do you ever do any type of like light study at night to gauge what the pedestrian experience is at night along 44th?
I've never done it with like a light meter or anything, but
No, not light meter. I'm talking about, you go out and you walk and you rate the experience.
Like a qualitative kind of assessment of.
Yes.
Yeah.
It might be some volunteers, but how do you feel? Do you feel safe? Does it feel, adequately lit? Does it need more light?
yeah.
I can walk from Longs to New Image this weekend.
So in the process, we relied on the community input, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's not a bad idea at all. I
It's-
mean, we really
yeah.
do try to get, Mark actually lives just east of the corridor, as you probably realize.
Yeah.
But he and Evan, one of our key associates on the project, walked, I think, pretty much every block, but it was during the daytime.
It's daytime.
Because
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
interesting.
like, I feel like sometimes that does get overlooked.
For dark sky ordinances, for working in areas that don't have development, that is something that we've done more commonly, but for existing areas, we haven't done it as much. But it is interesting considering the historic character of a lot of the uses along it.
Yeah.
We'll look into it.
And that's an issue that's come up recently in our community with areas that citizens feel that there isn't enough light, and they feel there's a perception of more crime. I'm not advocating for over brightening. I'm just trying to get a sense of like what, here's 10 people, and how do they feel walking down certain areas and identifying, is this enough light or too much or not enough, and it doesn't feel very safe, if we really want this to be more of a pedestrian corridor.
And the plan does note recommendations, especially at intersections, in addition to those critical crossing intersections of moving from two different scales of light to increase that both perception of safety as well as the overall, I think, aesthetic of the corridor. But that's something we can certainly dig into more detail on in the implementation strategy.
Well, I think one of the general strategies also is just to introduce pedestrian lighting, because a lot of it's the auto, sort of geared
Right.
towards autos. And so you end up with a well-lit roadway and not necessarily sidewalks. And then especially when you start to look at the cross streets, kind of heading north-south. So yeah, we can definitely look at that
Okay.
further.
And I'm a cyclist, and I definitely support the bike lanes. I completely understand cyclists getting, on the sidewalks along 44th. I would not want to bike along 44th generally without a bike lane. But then I've biked enough too that I agree with my other council members that the number of curb cuts makes it dangerous. It always does, and it doesn't matter what city I've traveled. When there's a lot of curb cuts, there's just going to be cars coming in and out, and there's going to be more of a frequency for an interaction between the vehicle and the pedestrian. I don't know how you solve that, but me personally, I would probably, from where I live, and I live a little bit further than Mark does, I'd just hop on a Clear Creek Trail and head out as far as I could that way. But then at some point, if I want to go north along 44th, I would need some type of safe crosswalk access that feels safe. Thank you.
I think, don't our site improvement recommendations include some access management, which would
Oh.
look at consolidation of driveways where possible, a reduction from 2 to 1 if properties have more than one, if they can share, and then looking to the councilwoman's point earlier, looking at shared parking opportunities as well. So understanding that people are, even if we do create a really nice pedestrian and bicycle environment, people are still going to drive to many of these destinations. So accommodating that, but maybe not every establishment has to have their own dedicated parking. Maybe that there can be some shared parking opportunities.
Yeah.
We'll go to Ms. Hutchinson, and then I've got Ms. Nosselbeck on Zoom.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just am wondering here, a lot of businesses that are on 44th have been here for a very long time, okay? And their business can be automotive, repair shops, they need to have parking, there in their place and things like that. Have you clued them in as far as what you're thinking about?
Yep. Talked to almost every single one of them in person.
Door to door.
Door to door, yes. So we, I wouldn't say co-opted, but built on the business walk that the Economic Development Group here, led by Steve Art, hosts every 2 years. And as part of that, through the sub-area planning effort, had extended conversations around the overall planning, the intent of that. A lot of those uses are happy as they are, and no plan kicks uses out of place. They can continue to operate in their current location as long as they see fit. The plan, I think, through this process has identified that we do have a lot of auto-oriented uses in that we sell cars, we sell car parts, we fix cars, we fix specific car parts, and we have a lot of those covered. And we probably don't need more of those particular uses, regardless of the historic legacy. They're serving a great role, but that focus might not be the focus moving forward. So to the degree that there are opportunities to look for new uses to integrate either with them. I mean, is it Quarterson that actually is attached to Tech One, right? Having a custom wood, like cabinetry shop tied to an auto body shop, like that's great, fun, like funky mixed use that's already existing on the corridor. It wouldn't be to prohibit that, but be to find opportunities where, as we look for new uses, it might not be another car sale shop or another car repair shop, if that makes sense. So you're totally right. They're aware of the process and have been encouraged to stay involved and have Stephanie's contact information. They have my contact information. I think they have my home address, but they're
Well, do some of these shops own their whole property?
some of them do, some of them don't.
Yeah.
And some are
So-
excited to engage. Others are like, we don't. I mean, it's interesting as a use because their role or relation in the community isn't really specific to where they are because people are driving to them. No one's walking to the auto body shop, right? They're taking their car with them.
Right.
So their base is very mobile. So when we've asked them, like, are you engaged in the Chamber of Commerce? Are you engaged in our business associations? Are you talking to your neighbors? Like, no, this is what I do. This is my bubble. That's fine. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But some of them were really excited about the plan. Others were just don't tell me what to do, which is also very fine. So I don't think it was good or bad one way or the other. It was really important insights and really helpful when we were thinking about all the businesses as I think it was noted as small business focus for that particular east end there. So when we're thinking about Joe's property to the east end and Heidi's to the west and everything in between, they have different roles in a commercial corridor. So we're not trying to, I think, prohibit them, but we're probably trying to focus it a bit more so on what the community has been asking for. So.
Yeah. Okay, I was just kind of wondering about that because I didn't hear anything about the businesses that have been there for a long time and how they're feeling all about this. Because no matter what the talk is, in 20 years, we're still going to have cars.
Yep.
They're not going away. And the whole thing about cars is, not a lot of people are going to the grocery store, on their bikes, getting a week's worth of groceries on their bike. So you still have to have a car. You got to take your kids to activities and things like that. So the idea that cars are going to go away, they're not, And plus, you can't use a bike on the expressway.
Yep.
So, we have to still believe that there are going to be cars, and, but I was just kind of concerned about the small businesses because, yes, they do have a lot of entrances because they need them. So it wouldn't work to have like multiple parking areas for these kind of businesses and things like that. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
It would be a custom, sort of process, talking to each, an access management plan there's actually professionals that do just that. Usually engineers or transportation planners. But yeah, you go door to door, you work with those properties, you figure out if it can work, and sometimes it can't. And so it may be on a particular, there are blocks, but not sort of traditional blocks along each section of this, but, along a block, it might be that you get rid of 2 driveways, and, that's a win. But most of those properties are unchanged in certain instances, so yeah, for those that would need it, there would be nothing saying that they have to get rid of a driveway or get rid of parking spots.
And so how long of a project, how many years do you think this project is going to be?
The planning horizon that we were utilizing was 20 years.
We have no idea what's going to be in 20 years. You
Yeah,
know,
agreed.
just like every other project that's been planned here has been changed and changed and changed because, you know, everything changes.
Yep. Yeah,
Right.
we do our best guess, both from a technical standpoint and then kind of thinking about the community's vision. The best we can do is sort of talk to the community now about what their vision is for the next 15 to 20 years. And then we tried to build in as much flexibility as possible. To your point, you know, not precluding any particular use or any way that people want to get around, but trying to accommodate the options that people want to see as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We've got Councilor Nosler-Beck and then Councilor Dozman.
Thanks. I just had two things I wanted to comment on. One is Clear Creek Trail as an access point and utilizing that for bikes, but also I just know that when I was at the rec center at one of the meetings, got into a great conversation with some folks about having more access points to 44th from Clear Creek Trail too. And so I guess if, I don't know if any of that got to you all in any of the feedback, but that also seems like a really good biking solution, at least there. And I know that when I'm on like Clear Creek Trail, you know, my kids and I always try to like line up and be like, oh, this is where Swiss Flower Shop is, you know, if you were to go straight across here. So I don't know if you all heard anything about that. And then I have one other thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, so as part of the recommendations, I want to say there were about a half dozen across the corridor on the south edge that we'd identified formalized points of entry to the Clear Creek Trail system from one of the north-south roadways. In large part, that was in connecting to either crossings of 44th, because it wasn't just getting the southern residents to the creek, it was getting the community to the Clear Creek Trail. So it was looking at some of those alignments. I think Tabor was one of those, and that aligned with other recommendations in addressing the bridge in the near to midterm. And there were a number of others, but yeah, that was that came straight from, I think you grabbed my ear before you left, and we had a couple of community members as well. So that is noted as recommendations in the plan and is in alignment with the analysis that Logan Simpson's performed as part of their open space management plan to make sure that we weren't looking in different capacities as it relates to habitat restoration or otherwise. So,
Was one of your questions about how do you know what businesses are nearby if you're moving along the trail? Or no?
Well, that was the next comment I was going to just say, is that I think it could be really cool if along the Clear Creek Trail, if we have more access points to, you know, the business corridor, there was some wayfinding that said, you know, what businesses were just down this way.
Yeah. Yeah, as you were talking, that's where my head went too. It sounds really interesting, actually. I've seen it along a freeway, obviously, right? Like what's going to be at this next exit. I've rarely seen it along a trail, but I love the idea. It'd be really neat. A great economic development tool, because so many people are moving along that trail, both local residents and regional residents.
Yep. Awesome. And then the other thing that I just wanted to add, this was conversations that I had when I was at one of the meetings, was, you know, because of the auto industry, and I know you referenced like the RV business and stuff, but then also some of the like Edwards Meats and Young's and Heine's and some of the you know, local restaurants and stuff. Just as we're moving forward, making sure that as a city we potentially like maybe, you know, host car shows on 44th. And I know there's conversations about farmers markets, and I only last week, I think, maybe heard that there's a lot that goes into farmers markets that I probably don't know anything about. So making this statement with just saying like it would be great to potentially maybe that's an area where we would host farmers markets, because we also have so many, vendors around that area anyway. And so just once again, really appreciated the conversation, and a couple last little things I remembered from conversations I had with the engagements. So thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Let's go to Councilor Dozman.
Thank you. Just have a couple of comments to wrap up my thoughts on this. I wanted to thank all of you for participating in this, and I think 44th Avenue has a very unique conundrum that we're trying to solve because of the amenity of the Clear Creek Trail and the access that you have and the ability to move pedestrians and bicycle traffic along 44th Avenue, which is a major thoroughfare for Wheat Ridge to Denver, and then also to Golden. I take that west quite a bit to avoid the traffic on 32nd or I-70 if I need to. And so to some of the points that Councilmember Hutchinson made, we have to make amenities and accommodations to move pedestrian and bicycle traffic. And we also have to make accommodations for vehicular traffic. And because 44th Avenue is a primarily automotive business-centered area, I think that, whether we're having isolation or we're trying to integrate, I think that those topics of conversations are very well versed with your work. And I appreciate that you're considering right now and what is existing compared to what could be in the next 20 years and trying to integrate everything and find a solution where we're accommodating the traffic, the vehicular traffic now, and then hopefully being able to move more pedestrians and bicycle traffic on 44th. So I've actually lived along 44th Avenue on Hoyt Street for a majority of my life, with the exception of a couple of years at 38th and Harlan and Wheat Ridge. I'm in my childhood home, walked and biked to Pennington and then Everett, and a lot of our students, fortunately for our community, there are a lot of families moving into the area and choosing to walk and bike to school. And so I really appreciate those accommodations of safety to move our younger generations. And I don't want to say that 10 years ago and bringing up that drama again is going to create any more problems. And I agree that the demographics are shifting, and I hope that we're attracting young families into the community. That was my goal in being elected to council. I just do not want to get the businesses along 44th Avenue that are some of our longest standing businesses in the community up in arms about what we're doing as far as lane reconfigurations and traffic calming, which I understand. And I don't cross 44th Avenue very much as a pedestrian, and I did when I was younger because there wasn't as much traffic moving along that area. So thank you again for everything and for updating us and all your hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Dozman. Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Val, for I like your idea of the signposts. I'm picturing like a tall thing that has arrows to London and Vale and downtown Denver and long shots. Just I have it in my head what it's
I'm gonna design it right now. Give me a moment.
Okay. Any other questions, comments before we go? From me, I like what you guys have done so far. I think one of the biggest things that I asked of Mark when we were talking about this was, as you start this process, make sure you talk to the business community down there, because I think that's something that the city didn't do very well back with 38th 10 years ago or whatever it was, just having my family own a store up on 38th. So I think you guys have done that, and I think not trying to move curb and gutter and all that, but trying to figure out a way to be able to move pedestrians and cyclists and traffic all at the same time. I think that works out really well. I do actually like Council Noslerbeck's idea about somehow getting some signage on the Clear Creek Trail, because I walk that quite a bit, and sometimes I'm like, what street is that shop on, or whatever it is, and it would be nice to be able to just jump off real quick and go get a beer at New Image or something, and then jump back on and keep going. So that's a great idea, economic-wise. Do you have the recommendations and comments that you need from us so far tonight? Does that help you?
I think so. We're mostly making sure we didn't or any red flags that as we were exploring these and kind of digging into the details. As you've seen in your advanced packets, those are descriptive bullets, narrative to support that. We're getting into the actual how-to and so what language now. I think we have drafted 150 actual things that like translate this into tools that the staff can use to bring that forward. So just making sure we didn't miss any big marks in this. There wasn't any specific, like the signage and wayfinding piece tied to Clear Creek back to the business district. That's perfect. That makes a lot of sense, and there are ways to fold that specific language in. So, yeah, this has been very helpful.
Yeah, this was a great discussion. I think to your point, all of you who chimed in on talking to the businesses, like, we should include that too as future implementation moves on. They're a tough crowd. They've been really hard to engage. That's why it took us going out to them to get them involved. But even so, some of them are just, I'm happy here, I'm happy to myself. So continuing forward, like just making sure we don't lose that piece, I think that would be good.
Yeah, I would say they're happy where they are the way it is. When you start changing things, all of a sudden that happiness goes away real quick. So you got to keep them up to date and let them know what's going on long before it happens, and every step in the middle too. Can we go ahead and get a consensus then to continue to move forward with the sub-area plan and go from there? There we go. That's all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, let's move forward to agenda item number 2, the Wadsworth construction update, phase 2.
Thank you, Mr. Stites. We gave you a few hints to this during the budget process and maybe a few other meetings, but as you know, the Wadsworth project was broken into 2 phases, mainly because of funding, and we've recently got some numbers on what the phase 2 will potentially cost. And as you can imagine, as everything is today, it's came in quite a bit higher than we hoped, but it's kind of matching what we're hearing around the metro area and the country. I just had a meeting last week with some folks. They were talking about the 6th and Wadsworth interchange improvements, and they said their price almost doubled on them also. So Maria put together a good memo with some current status of the Wadsworth project and some options on how we could potentially move forward with phase 2. So I'll just turn it over to Maria. And Mark, of course, Mark's down here to help with answering any questions.
Yes. Thank you, City Manager Goff. So we have just a brief PowerPoint that we'll walk through. As mentioned, we've laid out a couple of options for consideration. And basically our intent tonight is to get some direction from City Council as to how to proceed. So the devil, of course, is in the details, but if there was an interest in moving forward, then we would go back, work through those details, and come back with a formal proposal to you in action. So just a little bit of background in terms of timing. The environmental assessment was completed in 2019. Final plans completed in 2020. And at that time, the intent was to move forward with the entire project. So all the way from just south of I-70 to 35th Avenue, subsequent additional additions in grant funding. CDOT basically wanted to do the area just south of I-70 or where the connections are to the roadway there. So the decision was made to phase the work, going from the north end at I-70 ramps to eastbound I-70 south to about 41st Avenue. And so that project was awarded in August of 2021, and we've been under construction since that time. So the anticipated completion currently is fall/winter of 2023. We have had some delays due to work with CenturyLink and having them relocate their underground lines that were in the way. That has since been moved within probably about the last 3 to 4 weeks, so which has allowed additional, I would say, progress to be made in terms of speeding back up. So if you drive that at all, the corridor, you see a lot of storm sewer work that's occurring right now on the east side of the road. And paving has occurred down near I-70, and other utilities are, especially the water, is currently being installed as well. So trying to get all that underground work done so that we can start to move up above and start on the actual paving and other amenities on the surface of the roadway. So this, besides just the area from 38th roughly, or 41st Avenue to I-70, we also included through some options to extend the third lane down to 38th Avenue. And there was a desire by CDOT to replace the traffic signal at 38th Avenue. So that's essentially what phase one is we do have the continuous flow intersection, CFI at 44th Avenue, as well as a new traffic signal at 38th to precipitate and accommodate traffic along the Wadsworth corridor. We also, through those options that were added to the base bid, included sidewalks and streetscape elements all the way down to 35th Avenue, as well as a noise wall on the east side of Wadsworth near that, I believe it's an assisted living facility on the east side. Senior facility, okay. So the phase two is essentially the south end of the project. So it would construct 3 lanes between 35th and 38th, as well as the continuous flow intersection at 38th Avenue. And excuse me, the noise wall would be going in with this phase. So again, the signal would not be included, but then the continuous flow intersection would be replaced there. So staff did solicit a quote from our current contractor, Concrete Works of Colorado, just to see what the pricing would be. There obviously is some efficiency in having the current contractor do that. We wanted to see if those numbers played out in terms of, is this a reasonable price? Does it make sense to move forward? So that's basically option one. If we were to move forward, we would process a change order with them, and essentially that work would be rolled right into the current contract, and it would be basically that phase two work would be seamless in that it would look like it's part of the project going forward. The second option would be is to solicit formal bids. So that would, similar to the way we did with phase one, we would go out with our bid documents, our specifications, our plans, and actually solicit bids. And it might end up being Concrete Works, it might not. We had 4 bidders on the previous phase, so we might get others. And then finally, wait and bid at a later date. So those are the 3 options we are here to consider and talk with you about. And then we'll talk through the advantages and the disadvantages for each of those as we've identified them as staff. And probably one of the primary advantages is that, again, allowing for that more seamless work between phase one and phase two, it will look more like a seamless project. They will be able to use some efficiencies in that they would start to do that utility work in phase two immediately, and primarily probably construct everything on the east side before then flipping all the traffic over to the west side of the road. So currently, if you drive the corridor, they're working on the east side, you're over in essentially southbound travel lanes. And so this would allow for that work on the east side to continue in the phase two area before all the traffic would be moved over. There's cost savings in there in terms of just flipping that traffic back and forth, ease of construction for the contractor, as well as just more simplified traffic patterns for the public. We would also eliminate the need to construct future throwaway items. And throwaway meaning that right now the plan with phase one is to construct that segment or do some mill and overlay on the segment south of 38th Avenue with asphalt. Instead, the phase two plan is to construct that with concrete, both the intersection of 38th Avenue as well as south of 38th. I've already talked about the underground work, basically allowing that to occur. And all those construction impacts would be consolidated. So that's, I'll talk about that in a minute as a possible disadvantage too, but it would basically allow that work to continue in phase two seamlessly, moving on from phase one. But however, that would lengthen the time that we're under construction within the corridor by an additional approximately 15 months. And then pricing might be the lowest. So, you know, we have the contractor on site. They have an advantage in terms of being here. They know the area, they know the corridor, and they've been very forthright in terms of what they're giving us in terms of costs, even though they have gone higher, just as a result of what we're seeing in the construction industry across the board, both nationally and locally here. But their pricing has gone up, but I think we would see that likely in any scenario. Some of the disadvantages to moving forward is that it does require an additional roughly 15 months. And would that be, I use the word in the memo, intolerable for our business community? So we are hearing some comments right now on concerns from businesses about access and just lack of business due to people not being able to either access it or feeling uncomfortable about how they access their business. So this would extend that construction timeframe by an additional over a year. So is that a concern? Now, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't have those same impacts in the future, but is that a consideration in terms of how much can businesses tolerate at this point? Second, and a pretty significant one, is, pricing is not competitive. So our typical procurement process is that we would go forward and solicit bids. That's a very typical, especially for a dollar amount of the size that we're considering. So the opportunity to get what might be the lowest price would best be by going out for competitive bids. Without doing that competitive process, we don't know if we've gotten the lowest bid or not. We probably will, but we can't say that for sure. And then there are some lost costs due to what we've already acquired for long lead items. One specific example is the contractor has already ordered the traffic signal poles at 38th Avenue. That's a traditional, right now for phase one, it was set up as a traditional traffic signal configuration, and those poles are designed specifically for the length of the corridor that they're crossing. So there may be an opportunity for us to sell them, but possibly not, just because, again, they're made very specifically for each site. So again, for option 2, for formal bids, some of the advantages there is really truly transparency to the public. We're following our procurement guidelines. We're ensuring, hopefully, that we've gotten the lowest bid. That might be Concrete Works, that might be another contractor. And it allows for all potential contractors to bid on the work. So there's an opportunity by everyone to be on that level playing field. Oops. Some of the disadvantages with that is that we're probably unlikely, again, given all what we're hearing within the industry, what we've experienced with other bids, is that pricing is unlikely to go down. So we could be seeing potentially, if we went out for bids, even a higher price than what Concrete Works has already provided us with. This would, the disadvantage, it says Concrete Works has an advantage by already being on site. The disadvantage there is that, will we even get other bids? Our other contractor is going to go through the effort to put in a bid. If they know Concrete Works is already out there, why would we spend the time and the effort to put in a bid when they most likely will get it? Eliminating some of those concurrent activities, because again, now you've got phase 1 work occurring, and then separately at phase 2, and then the 2 contractors would need to work together. Not that that's overcomable, but it does add a layer of complexity to the situation. And then we would need to add a couple of months, 2 to 2.5 months, to go through that bidding process. And then finally, option 3 would be to wait and bid this at a future date. Not necessarily that the prices would go down, but again, just waiting to see, for allowing us to identify some of the funding, potentially look at other grant opportunities. I think Mr. Westberg has done an amazing job of getting grants up till now. The costs for the phase 2 work would all be city money. So this would buy us some time potentially to look at other funding sources. Also, in looking, so going back to my first slide about the timing, so the EA was completed and that traffic analysis was completed before Lutheran Medical Center had decided to move. So it was predicated on the fact that Lutheran would stay as is. Of course, that has changed since that was completed, And now, based on the master plan that was recently completed for the Lutheran site, that new development, whatever would go in there, would ramp up over time, and we don't see the need or the level of traffic coming back for probably between 2040 and 2045, so about 20 to 25 years. So over time, it wouldn't all develop at once, and so those previous or current traffic volumes would not be experienced out there, thus not needing necessarily that continuous flow intersection in order to move those higher volumes of traffic. And some of the disadvantages, obviously, just the longer we wait, the higher the cost. So it continues to go up. And then, again, we have those construction impacts in the future. There's the benefit, I guess, or pros and cons. Do we bite the bullet now in terms of doing the construction, or put that off to some future date that would, again, still impact the adjacent businesses and property owners? And then again, any of that temporary median, the pavement would be removed in the future for costs that we incurred today. This just gives some high-level costs of what we're anticipating, so that the actual construction work for Phase 2 is just over $14 million. We have had some negotiation with Concrete Works about that number. We would also need additional construction management services from AECom, who's been providing that out there to date. And then some additional contingency as well. So it's just over $16.5 million is what we'd be looking at for Phase 2. And with that, I'll answer any questions. Mr. Higgins and Mr. Westberg are here as well. They have a lot more history with the project, so they can supplement that and assist with any questions. Thank you.
All right, questions from council? Mr. Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One question I did have is, the Phase 2 is from 41st to 35th, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then
38th to 35th, roughly, yeah.
38th, 5th, because the document, I thought it said 41st to 35th.
Oh, okay, excuse me.
Anyway,
The line's kind of fuzzy. So we're getting 3 lanes going all the way south because of the work that was already done at the corners. We're basically getting through that intersection with the 3rd lane going south, but we're not getting 3 lanes going north until you get to 38th by just converting what used to be a right turn, an auxiliary lane into a through lane. Mm-hmm. The pedestrian improvements are continuing all the way to 35th, but the concrete paving stopping just south of 41st. So that's sort of where we think of this project ending, is just south of 41st, even though there is some stuff happening south of that.
okay. And then I know that it's common for a city to have consultants perform, say like concept plans, and then you solicit bids for DDs and CDs. I understand there being some hesitancy of, if this did go out to bid, of other contractors doing that, but that doesn't necessarily worry me. I think what I've heard from Patrick in the past is that things have definitely cooled down a little bit with building permits. I've definitely seen that in the market recently. Things are changing a little bit. I don't know if I'd call that a softening, but things have changed a little bit. But it looks like in 1 year they've increased it by 100%. Is that fair to say? The total fees have gone up 100% in 1 year? Because I'm just saying that because I remember like 8 million was the number, and now we're at 16.
Yeah, so 8 million was the number that we had looked at with using Concrete Works bids from a year ago. So then in Maria's memo, she mentioned that, plastic pipe is 300% more expensive than it used to be. There's just some of that stuff all over the place. Labor costs are higher too, but then to attract labor, to keep labor is also higher. It is for all of them. So yeah, so we felt pretty good about that $8 million when we first looked at this back in fall of 21. And then we came to council earlier this year, and there was the $10 million coming back from Big Creek Crossing. So they asked us, let's put all $10 million towards WASP, because we think the costs are going up. And they did,
So yes, it's basically doubled,
I'm
unfortunately, in a
so
year.
sorry to interrupt. Mark, I don't think Mark's microphone is on.
Oh, it wasn't that time, I'm sorry. I'll just leave it on from now on and try not to breathe
The answer
onto
to
it.
that question, Val, was yes, the price is basically doubled in a year.
Yeah.
Because I've heard through the grapevine that, yes, costs have been increasing across the Denver metro area by about 50 to 80%. This is 100%. So this is way above and beyond what I'm seeing in the Denver metro area
Yeah, and
for these
the
types of projects.
correct. The $8 million number we had didn't account for the additional $1 million in contingency that we'd like to have in there just in case something else goes on. We've had a fair number of delays and stuff because of CenturyLink, who knew about this project years ago, and we met with them all through the design process, and they just basically didn't do anything until construction started. So that's been a huge issue for us with being delayed. And there were some delays during the design process. You know, ideally, we would have started this project right about the time COVID started, and we probably could have shut WADS down to 2 lanes and done it for half the cost or something. But that's just not where we are today, and unfortunately, costs have just gone up. The concrete costs that they mentioned have gone up a lot, and it's a concrete street is what we're planning on doing, so.
Yeah, and it didn't include, our 8 million didn't include the million for the contingency plus the million for AECom. So
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you factor that, it's about an 80% increase when you factor out those two extra numbers for the
Right.
construction.
And then my last question is, I saw there was a comment about the Wheat Ridge Water District that they might be sitting on the fence and might pull out.
We got numbers from Concrete Works this morning, is when I got them, and they were about 2/3 the cost of what the Water District's engineers had estimated. So in our conversations with them previously, we're like, as long as the costs come in below the number we've got estimated, because we think we can afford that, then we're going to be, it's on. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, mine's on. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mine's working. Sorry. I was confused by your hand gestures. They were all nice hand gestures. They weren't bad hand gestures. But so I sent them an email late this afternoon and said, hey, the cost came in at 800 some odd thousand. You guys had estimated 1.2 million. So I don't think there'll be an issue with proceeding with the Water District stuff. But we'll certainly get that thumbs up from them while we're figuring out where else we can find funding for this.
And just to clarify, that is on top of the 14.1 million. So this is just truly apples to apples in terms of what the city costs are.
And they're reimbursing us for 100% of their costs. So it's a net cost of zero for us to have that Water District work in there.
You good, Mr. Holm? Okay. Counselor Weaver, and then I've got Ms. Nosler-Beck, and then Ms. Hulteen.
Thanks for your presentation. I'm curious, what is the city manager? What option does the city manager?
No, that's your job.
No,
It's
I
our
know.
job to bring options
I'm just
forward.
curious what your opinion is. I mean, I have an opinion, but.
No, it's
I just-
a tough one. We've been talking about this daily. You know, I think we can find the money to make this happen. We don't now, if we want. I prefer to get it done. Yes, it does extend it out. The businesses have been going through this, but you know, it was always at least a 2-year project. This will extend it out a few more months, but I'd rather get it done and get out of there. There is some impact on future development that I think is waiting and holding off until we get everything done. So I think we could probably find the money. We haven't done that full analysis. I think we put it in the memo that we would have to look if council does decide to move forward and we don't go out to bid. We know what the number is. We could go back and see if we can piece together the budget. We haven't heard yet on the $4 million that we asked for Congress. They were supposed to, the deadline was December 16th. That's when the current funding bill expired. The Senate asked for a continuing resolution for a week. So it's due right before Christmas. So hopefully they're going to get it done. We believe our ask is in this bill. It's in the omnibus bill. It's a $1.7 trillion budget, and we believe these projects are in there. So we hope we'll hear at the end of this week if that gets funded. So if we get that that'll make it much easier to fund this increase. So yes, I'd rather get it done, move on. I don't think prices are going to come down that much. And it's, we don't have to go out to bid. We've had conversations with our attorney. We can treat this as a change order. I think that's more efficient, keep the same contractor there. But it's a big number, but it's kind of out of our hands. Every project across the country is experiencing this, unfortunately.
Well, two things. I completely agree. I feel like it's something we should go ahead and do for lots of reasons. One main one being we just don't know what's going to happen with the economy and how money will be coming to us in the future. And if we're pretty sure we can find it, I think we should get the project done and keep it as short as possible. It's always painful, but my question in that is, so for the businesses that have been suffering on the north side of 38th, will that, when we say it's going to be another 2 years, is the whole thing going to be affected for the next 2 years, or will the construction that's happening on the north sort of start to alleviate as it, in other words, will
Yeah.
it be moving, or
Yeah.
is it going to be, is that making sense?
I
Okay.
understand, yeah. I think it will be impacted. So the intent, again, would be is to finish the east side first. So we would, it's my understanding, and we can confirm that, but Concrete Works would start between 35th and 38th, while they're just continuing to do the work. We're in current phase. Everything on the east side would be completed, phase one, or paving included, curb and gutter, and then they'd flip traffic over onto the new section so that they could work on the west. So the entire section, though, would be under construction for that entire time.
Okay. So I think my one caveat to going ahead and finishing it as soon as possible is that that we really are a little more conscious than maybe, I know we've been better and better, but some of those businesses are really still hard to get to, and
Yeah.
they're not signed very well, and they're suffering because people really can't get to them, or they have to drive way around. And I would appreciate working with the businesses a little bit more so that you're hearing their feedback. Obviously, it's not a great situation, but I think some of them seem to be impacted more than others because of the access in some of those streets. Thanks.
Certainly.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. Let's go to Councilor Nasser Beck, and then I have Councilor Holteen, and then Councilor Dozman.
Thanks. I have a couple questions. So the first one is, if we move forward with option one and have the change order, how quickly do we start that work? Is it pretty immediate, or do we need to figure out the funding? And are we still in a delay? I'm just trying to figure out, I obviously want to go with option two because I want to see if we can get a cheaper rate, but I understand that it's probably more efficient and cost effective to go with option one. So just wondering what turnaround time is.
Yes, I believe, so we would need to put that document together, so to finalize both the timing and the costs. So I would anticipate a few more weeks to do that, but then probably, mid to late January, we would be able to process that and move forward.
Got it. And then I had a question about the businesses. So phase one, when we went through the acquisition of properties and did all of that, did we do that for both phase one and phase two? I just need to be reminded.
Yeah, the right-of-way
Or-
acquisition, sorry. The right-of-way acquisition has been done for the entire project, so,
Okay.
it's been cleared from an environmental standpoint for the entire project, so it's just a matter of If we can find the money, then we can say go and we can proceed without getting any additional approvals from CDOT or anybody else.
And as long as we don't have like any more CenturyLink issues come up, like then we should be on track.
We think we've cracked that nut.
Got it.
So-
Cool. And then with the art project and the project that we're funding with the public art, is that for that we approve for phase 1 and 2, right?
Yeah, that takes care of all the art for the entire project.
Okay. Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's go to Counselor Hulteen.
Great, thank you. The nice thing about you guys going first is you hit some of my points. I want to underscore Counselor Weaver's point around business access. And I will add on to that, better management of safe pedestrian access, especially for transit stops. That just continues to be really problematic. I do have a couple questions, but I will say, regardless of the answers, I am in support of moving forward with option 1. I am not in public works or in transportation construction, but spend a lot of time in my professional life listening to statewide complaints around escalation of costs, and I've actually been hearing escalations of costs over 100% in transportation. So to me, I feel like our options are either to move forward with option 1 or pull it and wait it out, which could be a really long time. My concerns with that would be, the taxpayers voted for a half-cent sales tax for us to complete this project, and I feel like we owe it to our taxpayers to complete the project we said we would start. And I think a half-finished project isn't good for our community. I too am worried about the businesses right now. The entire project is contained within the district that I represent, and so, it's kind of like, damned if you do, damned if you don't right now a little bit with it. Like the construction is hard on businesses, but not doing the construction is also hard on the businesses. So I do support moving forward. So a couple questions I have, setting aside the $1 million contingency, are we far enough into this phase of construction to understand how our contingency allotment's been impacted?
Yes, I believe a majority of it has been expended already.
And so are we going to be in a situation, are we anticipating that we would have to come back to evaluate additional contingency funds?
For phase 1, yes. I did include a little bit for phase 1, so we would use this for both phase 1 and phase 2. But there is the potential for that, yes.
Okay. And if we're looking at this, I'm an optimist at heart, so I'm really excited to find out Congress is going to approve our request. It's a lot of pages. Nobody's going to go through and scratch out. We were just requesting there. But if we do move forward with option 1, how would that roll out over the next couple of years of budget? Like how many years of budget would that impact? I know there's a proposal moving over some of the funds that had been set aside through the Clear Creek Crossing transaction, but what would it look like for budget impact over the next couple of years?
Sure, and we'll have to take a deeper dive, but if you remember, as Mark mentioned earlier, City Council did give us direction to commit the $10 million reimbursement we got from Clear Creek Crossing for the Wadsworth project, minus $1.2 million, I think, for the Wadsworth sidewalk from 32nd to 35th, but we got a grant for that. Thanks, Mark. So we still have the full 10 million, but we budgeted 8 million in next year's CIP for phase 2. So we're going to have to make up that difference. So we're going to have to find 8 million. And if we get the 4 million from Congress, that's half of it. And then we'll have to figure out the rest of the 4 million. Does it all have to come out 23 or 24? Sounds like some could come in 24. We typically, when we contract, you should have all full funds encumbered, but we may be able to work that out. So we're probably going to look at potentially holding off on some other CIP projects, delaying a few, potentially cutting some back. looking at the general fund reserves to see how to supplement it. So I'm assuming it could be the 23-24 budget.
Okay, thanks. So just two more quick points. The federal and state funding that's really friendly, which is creating part of the cost escalation that we're facing and everyone across the country is, there really isn't new money coming anytime soon from state and feds. There's discretionary grants, but for this type of phase 2 project, it's a little bit harder to get. And Dr. Cog's not doling out any more money for a while. So I think, it would be tough to find funding outside of us to get this done. But I think it would be good to get it done. And yeah, I'm not going to make my last point. So thank you. Go Wadsworth.
I would agree with that, just in terms of, this would be considered a capacity project by Dr. Cog, and therefore, because we're adding lanes, and therefore the likelihood of, additional grant funding at this point is very low.
I will just point out that it is my other job to actually advocate against projects like this. I am frequently in a really difficult, but I do believe we've started this and we really should finish it. So, Dr. Cog does not like these projects.
Councilor Dozman?
Thank you. Councilmember Hulteen hit on most of my comments. I agree that we promised this project in the half a cent sales tax to our community. And I think that if we want to move forward with projects and asking them to invest in any future ballot issues, then we should definitely finish Wadsworth. My biggest concern is the businesses along Wadsworth, and I don't know, have you had any reach out and express significant issues, and how do you kind of mitigate that moving forward?
Yeah, you guys can expand on it, but I know there's been a couple of businesses that are very concerned and are looking for essentially economic development assistance. And you want to expand on that, Russ? Or?
Yeah, as we go through there, luckily when we hired AECom, we also put a PR person there who deals with all those businesses, and that's what we're starting to hear back. Outreach, talking to all those businesses along the way, what's going on, where do you know, here's when we're going to be impacting you. It's a daily conversation. Put together a good team. I mean, we've got CDOT on board, we've got AECom on board, we've got a contractor that is doing a good job out there. So those are the key pieces that'll even help us, expand as we go down the road, because you got that same team. But those businesses, we have heard, I know we've got a salon that's asked a couple times. This week, last week, I stopped into Grease Monkey, and it was, where is that drive? We need to do a better job. So we will. But I said, how you doing? He says, yeah, they're coming through today. We won't, get the business, but he says, my impact hasn't been too bad. I said, well, that's why I'm here using your business, because, we want to hear that. So that's something we got to do. Again, we meet every Tuesday. We'll bring up the PED. I know it's been a challenge out there, and even the pedestrians crossing in the middle of this construction concern me. So, but we are doing what it is. Sometimes the contractors move stuff, especially at the bus stops. We got to do a better job of putting them back in, and we'll make that a priority.
Surprisingly, we actually had a new restaurant open during construction, just north of 45th. Can't remember the name of it. Staff was talking about it today. So do you guys know, or do you know? It's a chicken place. I heard it's amazing. But yeah, so we're having businesses even open in the middle of a construction zone, which might say something too, but yeah.
But there's no specific, economic development assistance available to businesses. Yeah.
Good. I'll let Councilor Hutchinson go.
Thank you. If you did get some other bids, did they do free bids?
In order to solicit bids from other contractors, we would need to go through a formal bid process to do that.
Which means?
A competitive
You pay-
process where we'd put it out in
pay
the
them
market,
or
essentially.
whatever.
Yeah.
But even if you did that, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's free for us. I mean, we don't,
Oh,
there's no,
okay.
except for staff time. It takes
Okay.
quite a bit of staff time to get the documents
Sure.
ready and put it out. It's a lot of time and money for the contractors to
Sure.
put a bid.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So even if, we went that way, you don't know what the availability would be of these contractors either. Okay?
Correct, correct.
Most people I know aren't even going on Wadsworth right now. Okay, they're staying away from it. There is the entrance to where Safeway is, 38th and Vansay. That goes all the way to 44th. So Ross, the post office, all that, you know, people are aware of how to be able to do that. And I was at the post office today and amazingly got through. But ARC is going to open a business right next to where the post office is. And it must be the one from JCRS. I'm wondering, because that one is still closed. So they have a sign up that they're hiring. They weren't open. Some people were in there. It's just getting it together, but they have that ARC thing there. That will be a big driver.
Yeah.
Huge. So let's get this project done. Let's just do it, because we have no idea how the money's going to be going in the next few years and everything like that. And it's tough, you know. That's a main thoroughfare.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I knew CDOT wasn't so fond of all of it, kind of at the very beginning. But I think let's just push through and say, we got it done, and move on. Thank you.
Counselor Holteen?
Thank you. That actually reminded me of the point I forgot. If we start it and stop it again, I mean, it has been really a hassle. I mean, I'm just going to complain for a minute. I am, at this table, the most impacted person by it, because I literally cannot get in and out of my neighborhood without being impacted by it. But we have adjusted our traffic. Like, those of us who need to use Wadsworth and who patronize the businesses and live in the neighborhoods adjacent to it, we're put out, but we're making our way, and we know the modifications we need to make. I think it would be harder to stop, have Wadsworth not be under construction and then start construction again, and then de-habituate that adaptive driving behavior, which so that it does have an impact on the neighborhoods. And so, you know, for all the reasons stated, getting through it, I think, is just going to be best for everyone.
I think we've all had a chance, well, I haven't yet. So the quote that comes to my mind is, when you're going through hell, keep going. If we stop now, we're going to still have to go back into it at some point, right? Like a decent tagline for it, yeah. So I think all the points have basically been made. I've been on Wadsworth a few times. Are there signs up that say business is open while construction? I know a few of the property owners had asked for a couple of those. Okay.
We have some specific signage, you know, like directing into Grease Monkey, other businesses. I think we can look at that proactively and see what we can do. Maybe put them up higher, maybe enhance those a little bit more.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to ask for consensus that we go with option 1. That is, I don't see Ms. Nosler.
Val, do you have a?
I'm sorry, I just had one more comment.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry. I was just trying to get your attention.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Go ahead.
This shouldn't change consensus or anything. I just wanted to also, with the school closures and Wilmore Davis now being directed towards Stevens Elementary, if we could make sure that as we're configuring what those safe crossings during construction could potentially be, or make sure we're working with those schools, especially since we're making this project go a little bit longer. I just want to make sure that's on everybody's radar.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Val. And as we mentioned at one of the last meetings, Maria is already digging into that with some of the staff to look at, proactively look at some safe routes. So this is maybe great timing.
All right, one more time. Let's go back for that consensus for option 1. That is unanimous. All right. Thank you, guys. All right, moving on. Staff reports.
Nothing else this evening. Just a reminder, we're off the next 2 Mondays. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you have a good break.
All right, thank you. We'll go to elected officials reports. I'll start with the clerk.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah. Wherever you celebrate, please do it in peace and love and respect for one another. Have a great holiday season. Thank you very much.
No? All right, nothing from the treasurer tonight. Do we have any elected officials reports from counselors? Oh, and Counselor Nostelback.
Thanks so much and happy holidays to everyone. It's such an honor to be able to be a part of this council with all of you. And also, I'm so grateful to the decisions we made during the pandemic to make it possible for us to participate remote, so that I could be with you all tonight, because this was really an incredibly informative study session, and I think we've made a lot of really great decisions. I just had a question, I guess, for you, Patrick. We have a polar vortex coming to Wheat Ridge in Colorado, and I'm just wondering, I think that I just read an article that they're opening up the Coliseum, but is there anything that we can do for those in our community who are experiencing homelessness to make sure that they're as safe as possible?
Sure, and that's a good point. We should have maybe had an update for you tonight, but we do have this severe weather network in place, but I'll get an update from Rebecca to see if there's, because of the severe cold that is coming, if there's other options beyond our severe weather network, so we can get that information out. But I know they're working on it, making sure that there's plenty of room. We also, if the severe weather network facilities fill up, we still have the option to give vouchers for motels. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Counselor Hutchinson?
One question about this situation. I thought Healing Waters Church was going to be available.
They were the selected location with Severe Weather Network, but I don't know what happened, why they pulled out or it didn't work. It's the church up in Arvada now, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, and another thing, I've been getting some emails and some calls concerning the drive-by shootings that have occurred, like by 29th and Teller. Also gunshots have been heard, like 29th and Kendall, those new apartments, the Edgewater area and things like that. I'm wondering, is there anybody in the city engineering or whoever can go down the streets and look at lighting, what kind of lighting is on the streets? Because even when people have the ring bell, it's not picking up everything. I know there are some lights on Teller, but would those be like XL lights? Because I think they went around a few years ago and decreased the wattages and things, so like it's not as bright as it used to be.
We made a consensus last week to put that on a future agenda when you weren't here, Patrick, so it's something you and I need to talk about. But so it's on the list of things that we need to talk about here in the next month or so.
Just lighting in general? Or?
Lighting in general, but as it relates specifically to some of the drive-by shootings that we've had. We had a woman come in last week and talk about one that went right through her house.
Yeah, so minutes.
So that's definitely something that we need
I think we need to move on it. It's a public safety issue. I mean, and there was just a shooting on 38th and Wadsworth.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Did you want to add to that? Yeah. Councilor Dozeman?
Thank you. I just wanted to see what kind of communication staff is embarking on regarding the plastic bags and us being exempt from it, because I'm seeing a lot of signs pop up around local convenience stores and stuff that are indicating that that they're going to start charging.
Yeah, they have to charge for the bag.
They do?
It's not going to be taxed.
It's not going to be taxed.
Yeah, we exempted our tax. We can't exempt the fee. That's
So,
the state.
and do they get to choose, like on a like, can they?
They can bring their
accrue
own bag.
that- Well, no, can the business accrue that fee?
Oh.
And then not pass it on to the consumer? If they, or is that just like a,
We don't have any authority over that. I don't think the legislation stipulated that. All I know is that the city gets 60% of the revenues from the bag fees.
okay,
And you all decided to exempt the sales tax on that portion of the bag fee.
okay, all right,
Yep.
thank you.
If somebody's on food stamps, though, they don't have to pay for the plastic bags, do they?
I don't know about that. Is that something you read or you're aware, you believe was part of the legislation? Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't remember that, but I can look that up and let you know. Yeah, people could still bring in bags and not have to pay for anything if you bring in your own bags. Yep.
The people who are getting some assistance with food aren't
Yeah.
going to be charged the 10 cents.
I'll double check and
Okay.
I'll send out an
Thank
email.
you.
Counselor Holteen?
Thanks. I ride my bike to grocery shop and I use my bike bags, so.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I just want to wish everybody happy holidays. I'm a kind of a bah humbug holiday person. I don't particularly love the holidays, but my teenage son, who needs some nighttime driving hours in order to get his license, we had a really fun white knuckle tour of the neighborhoods the other night, so he could get his nighttime driving, and we just had so much fun driving around the city to see just some really amazing light displays. And so while I might be a little bit curmudgeon-y about Christmas itself, Christmas spirit is pretty fantastic. And so luckily we did not hit any cars parked on the side of the street, and it was really close. And then we went and got some ice cream at M's afterwards, and it just is now our new holiday tradition. So I hope we all have a good, safe, peaceful holiday, and I am looking forward to rolling up my sleeves in 2023 because we have a big year next year in this city, and I'm really excited for it. So, and we did good this year too, but 2023, buckle up, people. Looking forward to it.
All right. Seeing nobody else, I will take the opportunity to echo everybody in saying happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, happy everything else that's coming up. We will be off the next 2 weeks, and see you all in the new year. Thank you for letting me back up quarterback tonight.
You
Appreciate it.
did great.
Thank you. All right. We are adjourned.
Judy, you are correct. The carryout bag fee